it goes back to something that we encourage everyone and really, really get them to think through is, what does wealth and freedom mean to you? And I think the process of infinite banking is really the only way that you can accomplish wealth and freedom and have an increased level of peace of mind along the way as you're moving into that place. And so the thing that really is missed in all the traditional financial conversations is the value of peace of mind. And the more that I can control the banking function, the more peace of mind I have. And the more that I can control the banking function, the less I care about chasing rates of return.
Well, Brandon and Nate, thank you for joining us on the Infinite Banking Initiative. We want to start out by hearing about y'all and your story. How did you discover becoming your own banker?
We kind of have a unique story. So our business was born out of an accountability relationship that we had together. Brandon and I grew up together. We've known each other a long time. And but after high school, life just kind of takes you different directions sometimes. And we had reconnected back in 2017 and just, we just picked up where we left off. And so reconnecting, we just got into some deep accountability, holding each other accountable in different areas of our lives. We started reading books together. And in the midst of reading books together, I came across Becoming Your Own Banker. We both had Dave Ramsey backgrounds at that point. Brandon was a little more hardcore than I was, but I read Become Your Own Banker and I was like, man, Dave Ramsey would hate this book. But I finished it one time and I was like, what in the world did I just read? And so I went back and read it again and it started clicking pretty quick. And so I shared it with Brandon and I said, hey, you need to read this book and just tell me what you think about it. Like, give me your opinion on it.
And I look back on that when Nate messaged me, we were already in a season of what got us here is not going to get us there. Even though I couldn't describe it that well then, we were both kind of butting our heads against a system that was keeping a glass ceiling on us. I was in education and I'm like, there's only so far up I can go. And do I want to really trade the amount of time I have to give to go up in that minimal increase in income? We'd already begun to recognize that. And you guys know me well. I don't ever shy away from this reality. I first got right with the Lord. Nate and I connected, gave up drinking alcohol. I always say this, if you see me with a beer in my hand, it's non-alcoholic. Yes, I still like the taste of beer, but I give up the side effects of it that came with it. And so Nate and I started holding each other accountable. And what he and I began to realize is that you're only going to grow as far as you're willing to invest in yourself. And if somebody wants to help you more than you want to help yourself, then you're not going to get very far. And so Nate sent me the book and I'm like, it made my brain hurt because Nate says I was a little more diehard than him. My wife unaffectionately referred to me as DR. So I was definitely way more rigid than he was in the sense of implementing it. We've been doing it for 10 years. We paid off $120,000 in student loan debt in like 46 months, literally eating rice and beans, driving a bigger car, all these things. And as Nate says best that I like to copy because it was about our stories, I just felt like we were going to just barely make it over the finish line. And I knew there had to be something different. I just didn't know what it was. And, we have to learn and implement new things in our life before we can realize what else is out there. And I'll put a pin in that because there's a story Richard Canfield told me once about something Nelson told him at a dinner that's always stuck with me about things we don't know. But we're just honored to be here. It's a really humbling thing to be able to even have a conversation about Nelson and the Nelson Nash Institute and with his family, because 7 years ago, to even try to fathom that this conversation would be going on is impossible. So it's a great honor to be here.
Well, and then so after he and I both came to the conclusion that there is some value to this book and this information, we started doing research trying to figure out, what do we do with this now? Now that we know this stuff, like, what do we do with it? And so we came across this podcast, Life, Success, and Legacy. These two guys, Mike Everett and Chris Bay out of Kansas. We started listening to their podcast. We're very drawn to their story, their conversation, just how very matter of fact they were. There was no sales hype or anything like that. They were just kind of talking about their experience and experience that they would share with other clients of theirs or members of theirs. And we were just really drawn to them, really drawn to their stories, drawn to the fact that they were both followers of Christ. That was important to us. So we reached out to them, told them, essentially, we're these two knuckleheads from Texas who have read this book, and we need to know what to do. And so they came alongside us and started teaching us how to get our strategies set up. And me and Brandon were pretty much talking daily anyways because of our accountability. And every time we got on the phone, it just kept coming back to the excitement of IBC. And one day we were just like, if we're this excited about what we're doing, wouldn't it be cool to go teach other people how to do it too, the way Mike and Chris have taught us? And so we just shared with them one day, hey, we've just really been inspired by what y'all have taught us and how y'all do things. And we would love to be mentored by y'all. And very grateful that they agreed to mentor us. And so they poured into us for a couple of years as we were building our practice, our agency. And then one day we had this phone call where Mike Everett said, we're kicking y'all out of the nest. He said, we don't think we can really teach y'all much else. Y'all have picked this up pretty quick, and we think y'all are ready to fly. And so that was a fun conversation, because from the very beginning, we just had a lot of transparency in our relationship. So they knew that we just had a desire to go build something on our own. That was just something that our hearts were just really drawn to, this idea of owning something and putting a lot of our heart into it.
I am wired to not make it all sound like roses, and Nate is too. So we're very vulnerable in our story. If you know Mike Everett, Mike did not want to mentor us, because what we know now, we didn't know then, is that he'd had many people come to him and say, hey, would you mentor me? What that really means in most worlds is, will you tell me how to make money where you do all the work? And he had been down that road so many times already, he didn't want to do it again. Now, that's easy to say now, looking back. But one of the biggest blessings Mike and Chris gave us was the transparency and the vulnerability of where they were and where they were headed and where they are now. We get to see and be a part of still. But I'll never forget the importance of having tough conversations sooner than later. So we misstepped in something that we handled with some of Mike's information, not intentionally. Our intentions were good, but what we were doing, we didn't communicate well. And after we had an event together, one of our first in person together, Chris, because he's a great partner of Mike, had already kind of prepped us. Hey, be ready. This is coming. And it's going to come out of love, but it's going to be blunt force. And for those that know Mike, it was a vital piece to looking back, knowing how genuine of an impact Nelson had on Mike's life and how important it was for us to be good stewards of everything about it. And I think we relearn that lesson often still, 7 years in. We just got back from the last think tank, and it completely simplified where our brain and our mindset was, because we were a little too scattered. And it got us home back in on the main things are the main things. And so I know we didn't know Nelson personally. Nate and I say this all the time. But my grandmother-in-law, forgive me, I'm going to keep it clean. She's a precious lady. We have 4 children, my wife and I, Leah, and they all are obviously mine. And my grandmother-in-law says often, a bull ain't worth a dame if you can't tell his stock's from him. And so Mike and Chris are definitely stock of Nelson. And so even though we didn't get to know Nelson personally, we have the greatest kind of hybrid, because we've got Mike and Chris, James Nether, who's poured into us unlike any other. Ryan Griggs, I wouldn't leave him alone when I ask him questions. I'll record our conversations, go back and watch them, because I don't understand half of what he says the first time, because he's so in-depth. Richard Canfield, Jason Lowe. I mean, the list goes on. And here's what I love about that list for Nate and I, is they live it so well that it makes you know that you're accountable to the same thing. And so there was no expectation of anything other than show up, do the work, get better, learn, ask questions, and do it again. And they met us where we were, and they meet us where we are today. And so Nate and I just had a call this morning with two young men that remind me a lot of us. They're in their 20s. And so anyway, just a blessing to be here and have this conversation.
One of the things that we see so often is how often we laugh and we go back to things that Nelson said, and we're like, man, that guy had so much wisdom, because the entire message of IBC, he breaks it down into these stories and analogies and examples and all that stuff, but he also says it's actually really simple. And we're often the ones that make it really complicated, because when you really break it down, it's actually pretty simple. And I think that's one of the reasons why the message can be told in a children's book, as an example. You can break it down. You can break this idea down into a storybook level where a child can understand it at their level and an adult can understand it at their level.
Oh man, that opens this conversation up for a lot of discussion. And we were asked early on, is becoming your own banker compliant? And so Nelson would have said the same thing you just said, Nate. He should have written a children's book with no numbers in it, and he wouldn't have to worry about all that noise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And becoming a banker, I still have a hard time with it. Okay. And I've been, I read it in 2020 for the first time, and I've caught 2000, 25 years ago. And I copy edit it all the time. That's why it's messed up. But when I try to do to take the book and do a 5-step process or something like that, I can't do it. Does that make sense to you?
It makes sense to me. Probably doesn't to Nate.
Okay. I can't do it because I end up translating the message and getting out of the fundamental message and getting into something else. This probably doesn't make sense, but
no, it actually does.
I'm following you. It makes a ton of sense.
Because coming off of Think Tank, and the overwhelming message that seemed to connect with so many people was do simple better, like Jason shared. And one of the things that Brandon and I recognized is we had learned so much in the financial world that we had started complicating the message. We started adding language in there that made sense to us, but it didn't necessarily make sense to someone we were trying to teach.
I want to add to that, David, because I think this is recognizing our strengths and our weaknesses and having the beauty of the community of IBC, filling in the gaps to make it stronger, not weaker. So Nate can take a great idea with a bajillion words and sum it down to 3 words, and it makes sense. I can take 3 words and turn them into 10,000 and it not make sense. And so it makes sense to me, but not anybody reading it or listening to it. And so that's the blessing of what we think is going to be a part of our message is partnership's not bad if it's with the right mindset and thinking long range. So where it's really stuck with me simplistically is Nelson's 5 principles work in all walks of life. I want to be a great dad. I'm going to think long range. I'm thinking about what I want to be able to say about my kids when they're 60, whether I'm here or not. I'm going to be great at that. I'm not going to be afraid to capitalize. I'm going to put in the time, the energy, the effort in those relationships to pour into it. I'm not talking about money at all. Not talking about becoming your own banker. We're talking about life. And then I've taught my daughter this one. Don't steal the peas means do not treat people in a way relationally that you wouldn't want to be treated. In other words, think long range in how you put product back on the shelf, how you provide value, how you show up for people. And then don't do business with banks. Scripture is very clear. It doesn't say we can't have debt, but it definitely says don't be a slave to the lender. And because I know all too well coming out of a season that that's all good till it didn't. And it isn't any fun. And you realize what Nelson said at the end of the one of Nate, I think it's the audio version you listened to where he said, if we'll realize the greatest rate of return we could ever get is taking over the function of banking in our life.
Yep.
That is hit Nate and I over the head like a ton of bricks lately. And the last one is rethink your thinking, which is if we are so full of ourselves that we think we've got everything figured out, we are succumbing to arrival syndrome. And I tell young men all the time, if you don't believe you're waking up in a fight every day and arrival syndrome is at your door ready to knock you out, then you're already losing. And so it reminds me that every story we ever heard about Nelson was almost like it was coming from Nelson because of Mike and Chris and James and Ryan and David, you and all the people we've had the blessing to listen to. But there was two things that always stuck out to me and still do with his stories. He never told you what to do. Three things. He was always learning, and he'd rather talk to you about Jesus before IBC all day, every day. And when I tell you that that is in alignment with Nate and I, even before we realized it was in alignment, that's how simple it is to us now. But we forget that all the time because we like to make things complicated.
Lee, write that down.
No, that I think that you simplified that. That it does not have to be so complicated, and just keep going back to the book. And we hear all the time people say, "I read the book over and over and over again, and whenever I read the book, I see something new that I hadn't seen before." And I think it's all because you're in a different place in your life than the last time that you read that book. And that's why it's so important to continue that learning process that you talked about and to continue going back to the source, because the further you get away from it, the more you're going to complicate things, and, you just lose touch with it. You lose touch with the base. So, that's so important. You guys have mentioned a lot of names and people who've really helped you early on, and they're all members of this authorized IBC Practitioner Community. Why was that so important to y'all to be a part of that?
Being at the think tank for the first time as guests, we just got to experience the community at a level that we didn't understand at that point. And not only that, but because we like to say that we come from high stock, we feel like we have a strong connection to Nelson, even though we never met him. And so we made the decision early on that if nothing else, we wanted to be part of the practitioner program just to continue to honor him.
Yeah, and that was, Nate and I foundationally were the same there. Now I'm a little bit more back end CFO. I look at all the money numbers. We're just being completely transparent. And this is to encourage others out there. Focus and purpose is going to go somewhere. Energy and effort is going to go somewhere. What I mean by that is that amount to become a practitioner is scary, good. It's probably a good indicator you need to lean in and go, how can I afford this? What do I need to create value-wise to be able to do this? Because knowing what Nate and I know now, getting in that room with those other mindsets that have been doing it 20, 30, 40 years and having the ability to pour into those that are just starting going, hey, it's going to be all right. Just lean into Nelson and what the truths he told and read the book again and build around that and what you're good at is so vital that cost up front will save you the lessons of the School of Hard Knocks later if you'll really lean into that and being able to pay homage to Nelson also and our mentors who are straight from Nelson. They walked with Nelson, they talked with Nelson, they had conversations with him. And so you really can't beat that when you have access to it. And it's kind of silly not to tap into it.
Well, yeah. I don't know what to say. You're teaching me a lot today, guys. I'm serious. This is good stuff.
One of the things that we like to say is that, you're going to pay for mentorship or coaching one way or the other. You're either going to invest in yourself and you're going to get that reward, or it's going to be a lost opportunity cost, So, why not invest in yourself? I mean, we talk about this sometimes. There's different ways that you can invest. You can invest in traditional assets. If you take $10,000 and you put it into a traditional asset, as an example, and you get a 10% return, which is something that most people would expect. Okay, well, you made a little bit of money. But if you take that $10,000 and you invest in your education and your learning and your network and all those things, how exponential is that 10,000 going to return?
And Nate, it's probably the Lord's perfect timing. It's not probably, it is. The conversations this week alone that I've had, and it's Friday, have all been geared around, well, what do I do? These are with members of ours in ULC that have been paying premiums, relatively speaking, large premiums, okay, to their income. And I just felt like I should be doing more. And I said, I can tell you from my experiences, the more you invest internally to get clear on where you want to take action externally, the return will be so much better because you won't chase rates of return and things you don't understand because you don't understand yourself. So we've revamped kind of simply how we help people think through using a policy loan. Because, everybody forgets early that just paying premium is a privilege and getting to do it is a privilege. And you want to do it as often as possible. And if you don't fully understand why, go back and read the book again and read it again. Now, Nelson says after 2 times, if you don't get it, I think he says, I don't remember how he words it in the book. Yeah. I can't do that because that's not my wiring, but I love the humor. Nate and I's premise is we'll meet you where you're at, one way or the other. And if you're not ready yet, we'll still meet you when you come back. I'm reminded of something Winnie Lau said years ago on Jason and Richard's podcast. She goes, Brandon, I heard it to me. She goes, you got to meet people where they're at, not where you are. And so the simple piece is for our more advanced members who've been paying premiums 2, 3, 4 years, I'll go, hey, let's simplify what matters to you the most. For us, premium to income ratio percentage is what we track because we know if that keeps increasing, page 85, we know we're headed in the right direction. We track amount of money flowing out of our life that we now control inside our life. So control of money flow. And then we track at the very beginning, being able to try to outgive the Lord and the blessings he's given with a 10% baseline. Because we know if we go there first, it's all his anyway, and it's going to permeate through everything else, however he sees fit. And if it didn't go in the way we want it to, it's because there's something that we need to know and learn and understand and grow in. So when it's really that simple, I'll tell people all the time, hey, if you want to take a policy loan for anything, find out what you think you might be interested in. Wealth Without Wall Street guys call it, your DNA, your investor DNA, and you hear all kinds of different things that it's called. But if you don't know that, you're just aiming at targets in the dark. You don't even know what you're trying to hit, and I can share those experiences because I did tons of real estate, and boy, oh boy, the lessons it's taught me. I like being the banker way better than termites, toilets, and tenants. Okay, so
the three T's.
I mean, and Brandon kind of touched on it. The mistake that so many people make is they feel like they always have to be invested in something. And what we learn as we continue to lean into this is positioning yourself where you have access to capital and allowing opportunities to find you, as Nelson liked to talk about, is a way better way to live than going out there trying to chase the next shiny object.
Yeah, and I think about it, Nate and I have gone through this journey a lot lately. If you're not crystal clear on what God's calling you to do to glorify him, go to 1 Corinthians 3:10-17, where it talks about building everything on that foundation on Jesus Christ, then you will chase rates of return and the worldly things. And I'm guilty of it. We both are. But if you know your firm foundation is on Jesus, then you're actually kind of building a campfire that is solid and it gets bigger and bigger and everybody's attracted to it. And that's the biggest piece of advice I give young IBCers is if you don't know what you're great at, lean into that first and collaborate as often as possible because you don't know what you don't know. And the minute it starts creeping in that they're making more than you and you forget how many years they've done it and you forget the experiences they have and all the lessons they've learned, you're losing to arrival syndrome and you're in a scarcity mindset. Because I've been there. Because if you'd have told me 10 years ago I was going to pay for any coaching at all as an educator, I'd have laughed in your face. So I get it. I know what that feels like. And that's scarcity. And that's where the devil's playground is. I'm certain of that now. So,
well, what are some of the arguments that you hear against the infinite banking concept? And how do you address those, misconceptions, whatever you want to call it.
I think a lot of it really goes back to understanding that most people's understanding of whole life insurance is based on someone else's misunderstanding, and really just meeting people where they're at and sympathizing with them or empathizing with them, however you want to look at it, because we were all in a place like that at one point where we believed, oh, this is crazy. Like, why would anybody ever do this? But just recognizing that we build these ruts in our mind. That we're sort of indoctrinated to certain lines of thinking as we go through school and everything like that. And just recognizing that, hey, we've been there. So we know, in fact, I made this statement before, I've been a hardcore Dave Ramsey guy. I have been in your world. I have explored your world, but you haven't explored mine. So come explore mine.
Yeah. Lee, I think your question is so good. Early on, I would just word vomit on people and scare them to death. Okay, so I got to tell a funny story about how Nate and I are here, because we always have to understand that there's things going on behind the scenes, and I want to be around people who share their failures, because if all they ever do is share how good they are at something, run. Because it's a sales pitch. Okay, and Nate's background was sales for his whole life. Like, he's been around it his whole life. My background is the opposite of that. I couldn't stand it because I didn't really fully understand that we're always selling somewhere. I'm selling when I try to talk my wife into where we're going out to eat and try to make it her idea, or vice versa when we go choosing vacation. Doesn't matter. There's sales going on. It's really, do you feel confident in what you're selling and the value that it brings? Because if it's out of alignment, then you're going to create some conflict internally. It's going to happen. So early on, we were just trying to beat them to death with the truth. Now because of paying for coaching and mentoring and spending time investing ourselves, we meet them where they are with questions. And so I'll give you one specific example. Hey, Brandon, I just really don't believe that whole life is as good as you're making it out to be. And I'll say, okay, let's just walk through it if you're willing. Because we want to eliminate anybody who is already given into arrival syndrome and not waste either of our times. But we want to do it genuinely where they can come back if they change their mind. So that requires a lot for me, because I can get real haughty and proud of how much I know real quick. So I have to be around men that are willing to hold me accountable and going, that wasn't very respectful of their time. So I'll ask the question often, hey, would you ever underinsure your house? And just walk through that. Let them answer. Well, no, because of this, because of that, because of that. Would you pick which half of it you're going to underinsure? Well, no, because of this, because of that, because of that. And then we'll go, okay. And we got this for mentoring. We paid for this coaching to learn this, okay? Because somebody did it for 30-something years and shared it with us. And then I'll say, you wouldn't do that with your vehicle either, would you? No, because those are all things that I want to protect. So then we'll lean into the question of understanding that their income earning potential is the greatest asset that they have, the value they bring to the world now, and the money that follows. All that is actuarial science, or in smaller, simpler terms, that's how insurance companies determine what we're worth dead, basically, indemnification. And then as they go through that, they start thinking and they start going, so what do you mean by that? Well, if you were no longer here tomorrow, or you graduated like Nelson said, or worse, possibly, you couldn't work tomorrow, but you were still here. Would your retirement plan, your savings plan, your bill pay plan, would all those things continue? Or how long would they last? And so then they're thinking about how they think, because here's what I'll hear a lot of times. Well, I've got a disability policy at work. Great. Good for you. That is important. But do you know enough about it to know what will happen if that happens tomorrow? Well, no, I need to look into that. Okay. Well, that's kind of what we do. We go on a scavenger hunt or an excavation. We bring it all into the table, because the world teaches us to make individual decisions with money, when in reality, it's all like blood flow. It needs to be moving synchronously through our body in a healthy way through organs in the heart in a way that creates more vitality and more success as we learn more about our body. And that's the same thing with money. So a lot of times when that conversation comes up, there's been nothing of us telling them what to do. So we're living how we want to be seen as. And then their wheels start turning. And they're like, well, I went to look at my disability policy, and if I become disabled tomorrow, it's 40 to 60% of my base income, which is pretty standard, typically, and I'm taxed on it. Okay, so let's go to the next question. If you only had half your income tomorrow because you're disabled, what's life going to look like? And so we just keep going down this journey of conversation until they are brought to the precipice of, I'm skeptical on this, and that was a skepticism that I've remained in, which is really insanity. And I'm willing to do something about it now. And Nate and I stole this from a guy named Pace Morby. We want to build our practices and procedures around letting the work be the filter. We always want it to be in their court. If you're not willing to read a book, if you're not willing to listen to a podcast, if you're not willing to come to an event and learn, then you're going to stay right where you are. And that's okay if you're happy doing that.
Yeah, we often say that, in a conversation, like maybe it's an introduction conversation or something like that, hey, I'm going to give you some growth work. It's not homework, it's growth work. And if they do the work, that's a very good indication when they show up on the next call that they are leaning into this. So if you show up with the right posture, with the right heart, I'll spend all day with you, teaching you and pouring into you. But if you show up needing to be convinced, or you want to argue with me or something like that, I don't convince people. I don't argue with people. But we're very fortunate enough in our practice that we just get to connect with some really incredible people. It's been a very long time since somebody showed up on a call with me and was trying to argue with me about this. It's a blessing that we get to connect with people that are like-minded. And when you get to connect with people that share your values and things like that, it makes the experience of working together so much more enjoyable.
And I think where Nate and I have been blessed to have guys like Mike and Chris and James and Ryan and Richard and Jason pour into us is they've never told us the way to do it, but they've lived, do it the way that's going to attract the type of people that you want to spend time with. They never said it that way, but looking back, you got to be you. And I said this today to Nate, walking down my road on a walk as we're talking, this reality of we're getting 7 years in. This is for all the newbies out there that's starting. 7 years in, and each month this past year, I have realized, and Nate have realized how little we know. When we started, we thought we knew a lot. The older we get around great minds and great people and great questions, the more we realize we don't know anything. But that's okay. That's actually great. And leaning into that. So Nate and I now have the ability to have those conversations. So much so that on occasion, like recently, I had a member that's a dear friend of ours that actually we're going to catch a ball game before too long. He's coming in from Wisconsin. He sent me the most skeptical IBC person that he does business with. And I'm talking about intense, and so I said, hey, if you'll go on this journey with me, because you say you like to learn, let's see if we can teach each other something, even if it's getting more comfortable in our points of view. I was not equipped to do that 5-6 years ago. I would have got emotionally charged, and anytime you're emotionally charged, you don't fully understand what you're doing. The logic goes out the window. From my experiences, I won't tell why I know that so well. So we've been going back and forth, and I said, if you're not going to read the book, if you're not willing to do that, then you're not living what you say you stand for, which is that you're always willing to learn something there. Because what you tell me you know about this is misinformation. But you got to decide that. And he hit me back with this scorched earth theory, and I said, doesn't matter what I think. Matters what you think.
So going back to you, Nate, why are you attracting the right type of people now? What's the genesis behind that? How you doing? Is it referrals? What does that look like?
probably the biggest reason why is because we've gotten so clear about who we are, and really so clear and so confident about who we are, but also really transparent to the people that are out there as far as who we are. I made this statement not long ago. The more we show Jesus, the more we point to Jesus in our business, the less marketing it seems like we have to do. Because people are either really drawn to that, or they're not going to be drawn to that. And so, not to say that I'm using Jesus as a vetting tool, but the people that aren't drawn to that, we probably wouldn't have had a good experience with in the grand scheme of things. And so when you're just living out who you are, it just makes it very easy, because integrity is going to protect you from a lot of things. It's going to protect you from traps. It's going to protect you from getting in situations and connecting with people who aren't aligned with who you are. And alignment is something that's really important to us. And I tell people on our intro conversations, hey, we don't work with everybody. And it's not about your income. It's not about your assets. It's about your mindset. So if you don't have the right mindset, we're not going to be in alignment with one another. But if you do have the right mindset, we're going to have a lot of fun.
Yeah. And on that point, David, to add to, Nate and I spent more time this past year getting clear on how God created us to be business partners and thrive. So Nate's a visionary in the grand scheme of the traction model, if you've ever heard of that. I am an integrator. Now, over 7 years, Nate's visionary mindset is rubbed off on me, and my integrator mindset is rubbed off on Nate. That is very clear. Like, if you could journal where we were to where we are now, you see that it's like a lot like marriage. You know, marriage is either like this or it's like this. And that's the truth all the time. And all those little fingers in your world and their world are wanting to do different things, but they have to come together to glorify the Lord. So when Nate talks about getting clear on it, Nate is the front side person for almost all things. Like anybody that's a new traffic lead or referral, they come to Nate because that fills his cup, fires him up. I will go crazy if I sit in this office more than 1 day a week. I will lose my mind. So I am out and about at coffee shops, at churches, living my normal life and having conversations. And then I'm visiting with members on the back end, and we're building a team behind us that is exceptional at what they do. I want to touch on that real quick for anybody listening. The only way you can know what you want is to really be in it for a while. Like I did underwriting for 2+ years. I had to, in my mind, that we had to. If I knew what I knew now, then I don't know if I really had to, but I thought I did. Okay. So now all of our back end team are all ULC members. They're all married couples almost, and they all live life the way that we live life, with thinking of others first. My parents run the apps and underwriting department right now. They just retired. My Gavin and Ashley, they run our team called Currents Team, but they believe in IBC and they just help our members with cash flow. VIP is our virtual integrity partner group and team that I've been partnered with, and Nate has for years. They handle marketing, podcasting, episodes, all that, but they are ULC members. Our director of member success has been doing IBC longer than Nate and I with her husband. She found us. And so we didn't just naturally arrive at this. It kept becoming iterations by trying other things. And then we bumped our head or our knee or fell flat faced, and Nate and I go, that sucked. That was not ideal. Why was it not ideal? Well, because we were misaligned with the person doing our marketing. They were trying to get us to sell something when we're trying to say this is a lifelong process and it's caught more than taught. But you could only learn those things if you take action. And today, Nate and I were having a conversation. If you're going to have a successful partnership in business, because I've seen unsuccessful ones, and Nate and I have had our rough times too. Like Nate says often, you have to remain selfless all the time. Very similar to marriage. It ain't about what I want all the time, hardly ever. It's about everything else going on. And you also have to be willing to change with each other. And the only way that Nate and I can think generationally with ULC and think about when we're no longer here, what do we want to be able to say, God willing, with ULC and what it really means, is you have to be willing to change through seasons of life with your business partner. And so Nate's done that for me a bajillion times. Money just happens to be the condition of the, connected to the heart. But it's the money that just makes the heart move, and controls it. And so if Nate and his family are unrested or not at peace with whatever's in their life, I'm only fooling myself if I don't think that directly connects to what we're trying to do together. And so it's just this awareness that I would encourage all IBC practitioners to not be scared to swing and miss on partnerships. It gets such a bad rap, but if you really think about it, we weren't created to be alone. We weren't created to figure things out on our own. Because if we were, then Jesus wouldn't have sent disciples out 2 by 2. We are meant to go out there and do life together. And many people call it the trellis and the vine in the world of a relationship with Jesus. We want to keep letting that trellis and vine connect and grow. So y'all got me on my high horse. It's one of my favorite things to talk about.
I think that's great advice. Yeah. Well, can you share with us how the infinite banking concept has impacted your clients' lives and the people you work with?
We have a lot of fun stories. And my favorite stories are from the people who maybe didn't have a whole lot to start with, but they started with what they had. And we get to see the radical shift in what takes place in their life. So one of the stories that I tell often, this is just a lot of fun for me. I connect with this guy back in 2020. At the time, he was a manager at Hobby Lobby. And he said, Nate, I've essentially gone as high as I can go unless I'm willing to relocate my family. But I know that I was made for more. And so he said, do you have some ideas on what I might could do to, get some extra income coming in? So I gave him some ideas, and he was starting to work with us. And this was May of 2020. So he gets his first policy in place May of 2020. And he took some of those ideas that I gave him and he ran with them. So when we started working together, he had 21 and a half years left on his mortgage. And he had just signed up for a 4-year car note because they just had a new baby. Between implementing IBC and making extra money, from May of 2020 to December of 2020, he was 100% debt-free, and he had left Hobby Lobby. So wild. Just a crazy, crazy story. And now he just gets to spend as much time with his family as he wants to.
Well, what he struck oil in his backyard.
David, one thing that Nate and I have been humbly reminded is that this isn't magic. If you don't know clearly what you're called to be doing, and I'm just going to speak for men, and that's who I interact with the most and connect with the most at first, often is new husbands, new fathers, men who've given up drinking, those kind of things, seeking the Lord. We're designed for something greater than just showing up and collecting a paycheck. And I think Nelson says that all through everything he's written, indirectly, if not directly. And we're here for a reason that is far beyond anything that we can fathom. And I can go back to Genesis. We were created in his image, and he said we were very good. So that means that we've been gifted and given something that all the other beautiful things haven't, that we see in this world. And so when I'm talking to a man and he's telling me all these things that he hasn't figured out, I'm like, we got to figure out what God's created you to do for his kingdom. Because if you don't know that, and you're not certain of that, you will be aimlessly wandering around for the rest of your life.
And are miserable. Yeah.
Miserable, yes. And so, it all starts with, what do you really want? Well, most men want to provide. They have a deep desire to provide that God gave them to, in my opinion. Most of the wives, from my experience so far, and I never speak for women, that is a dangerous thing to do, but most of the wives that have told me, they say security and peace of mind is important. Well, when you can merge those two things together and take all that energy you're already exerting and just move it over to a better system, those things start happening more naturally. And that's really the simplification of it that we've learned. My favorite story is a teacher, somebody I coached with and taught with. She was one of the best teachers I've ever worked with. Took years to even come to us because she said, Brandon, I was so nervous to share the mistakes that we've made. And the reality is that anybody listening, 99% of people feel that way. Multimillionaires to making 50 grand a year. Because as Nelson said with Parkinson's law, as income goes up, so does expenses. And if we don't have a system for it, we're going to get eaten alive with bigger problems, bigger bills. And so literally in a span of about 3 years, because she was already disciplined, not scared to think long range. She's a coach mindset, very successful. Her family repositions all that outside debt, which was headwind on credit cards, and had all these little baby payments that were just getting eaten alive by 20, 30% credit card interest, and had no death benefit at all, anywhere, to fully shifting that headwind to tailwind and sending $3,000 a month on teachers' incomes to premiums or policy loan repayments in 3 years. Just by putting it in a better system with the right mindset that our dear mentor, Chris Bay, would often say, or Mike, if you're willing to take 2 steps back and really see what's going on, it'll allow you to take 10 steps forward. But most of us are not willing to take 2 steps back in any walk of life. Our marriage, our relationships, our money, doesn't matter. Because then we have to admit maybe we didn't know as much as we thought we knew.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about principles in the book. And, when you go back and read the book, you get something new from it each time. And we actually started a series on our podcast where we're walking through page by page through the book right now. And we're having a lot of fun with that because we are starting to pull things and have these conversations together about, oh man, I forgot this, or, because sometimes at least for me, when I'm reading, I'll see something that really resonates and then I'll keep reading, but I'm still thinking about that one thing and I'm just going through the motions and I'm not getting it all. And so it's been a really healthy process for us to go back together and be walking through this and having conversations about it.
Yeah. And as the MC, if you will, who kind of guides it and leads it, there's so much depth and so much of it the longer you go and realize what you didn't know. And looking back, so on one section we're in right now, I told Nate, I was like, I'm pretty sure we can record 30 minutes to an hour on each page easily. Because you have life to connect it to. You have stories that David's told. You've had, stories that we hear at think tanks, and you go, that's what Jason Lowe meant when he said this. And I just got done reading, y'all didn't ask me to plug this, but I just got done reading How to Buy a Whole Life by Ryan Griggs. Holy moly. I messaged him immediately. He's been such a blessing in our life. Ryan may get a bad rap for being kind of tough as far as an exterior goes, but he's guarded and protective of the truth, and he doesn't want to waste his time with people who aren't serious about being genuine with what they're teaching. That's been my take, because he's always helped us. He's always been willing to give us insight. So he said, well, what did you take away from it that was so vital? I said, you stepped on my toes. There's some things that I've been saying that the intentions were good, but I need to expand a little bit more or tweak it a little bit, because that was a half truth, not intentionally. It's just how it creeps in, because you forget what you forgot and you go, oh, that's what it was, but it wasn't. And so he's like, well, I'm glad to hear that. And it also allowed me to give it to my team, our team, my absent underwriting team, and they read one section and it helped them be better immediately. Now, I agree what he says at the beginning. All you need is becoming your own banker. That is true, but it is a great supplement to really help you understand how to implement becoming your own banker and find the ideal person to work with. And I really appreciate how in-depth he went on that.
No, yeah. When I first got that book, I've said, man, we've got to promote this.
Yes.
That needs to be mandatory reading for anybody who goes to any kind of professional training in the life insurance industry. I mean, it's a Bible. That's all you need for the life license test.
That's exactly right. Well, it's actually, Ryan did us a solid, and he may have signed a few copies for us. So for our members that have been living IBC for a long time that know Ryan, we'll often send them something when they expand their system, and that's one of the books we send. Or if it's somebody who really latches into it already, all of our new members get a really nice box that has all kinds of learning and literature and connections with people that we've done business with that are members of ours that have product in other places. It's just all ULC related, but it's really Nelson and becoming your own banker related. So that book has started to be in almost all the member boxes. And we're like, be sure you dive into that, because it's always, and then what? Even when you understand the theoretical and you're like pie in the sky, I kind of get it. You still got to know what you're going to do at the ground level. And you got to have people willing to help coach you there, which I think Ryan did a really good job of helping you think through, or us.
Well, Brandon and Nate, as we wrap up our time with you today, I just want to ask each of you, what does the infinite banking concept mean?
I mean, it's kind of simple, because it goes back to something that we encourage everyone and really get them to think through is, what does wealth and freedom mean to you? And I think the process of infinite banking is really the only way that you can accomplish wealth and freedom and have an increased level of peace of mind along the way as you're moving into that place. And so the thing that really is missed in all the traditional financial conversations is the value of peace of mind. And the more that I can control the banking function, the more peace of mind I have. And the more that I can control the banking function, the less I care about chasing rates of return.
Yeah, I'll add to that. It's very in line with what Nate's saying. I remember James Nethery saying at Think Tank a couple years ago, and paraphrasing, he said, you don't ever think about need for control of capital till you have it, or you don't and you wish you did. And that leads to certainty and control. And certainty and control, I am convinced, of how capital flows through our life allows us to battle evil with good better. Because that's really what's going on. It's a battle of good and evil, in my humble opinion, behind the scenes. And the more capital we control, normally the more time we have. And the more time we have, the more diligent we become in how we use that time. And then we can fight evil with good. Dollars are just the thing that fuels that. And so it means certainty and control to me. And it means that even if I swing and miss on 1,000 ventures, that my wife and family will have the ability to take that windfall of what my heart meant and have the heritage and the knowledge of how to continue to use it in a way that glorifies the Lord. And Nate said in his new book that he wrote on the kids' book, what was that line, Nate? We don't pass down money.
Yeah,
we don't pass down money. We pass down how money works.
How money works. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what it means.
I'm in the early stages of working on, kind of a kid's book, a kid's story that I think will really resonate with a lot of people. So I'm excited to share that in the near future.
Thank you guys for joining us today. We really appreciate sharing your story and giving such great advice to so many people, so many of our listeners and viewers. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate you very much.